Today, I want to show you how I swatch for knitting in the round without actually knitting in the round and without needing to cut the yarn. So, what I've done here is I've cast on 10 stitches. Now, obviously for a swatch, you'd want to cast on quite a fair bit more, but for the purposes of having a quick tutorial, I've only cast on 10. The process works with any number of stitches. So, my working yarn is here and I'm just going to knit my first row. And I apologize if my knitting looks clumsy or awkward. It's very hard to have a camera in front of you as you knit. I can't actually see my stitches, I can only see myself through the camera, so slightly unusual on this end anyways. Okay, so I've knit my first row. And now normally what you do for swatching in the round is you carry this yarn across the back. You need to be using a circular needle or 2 double points so you can slide the stitches. Now normally what the advice that I've always been taught was to sort of float your yarn across the back, start knitting with this yarn, and then you cut these floats at the end. But what you can actually do is measure out a piece of yarn that's 3 times the length of your row. So you can see that's 1 length, I'll put that there, then we'll do 2 lengths, and I'll put that in there, and then we do 3 lengths. So now I have 3 lengths and a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to knit my first stitch as normal. Okay, so now I have the yarn that's connected to the ball, and then I have this very long loop. You're not going to knit the second stitch with the yarn connected to the ball. You're going to knit it with the yarn that's in the loop. Sorry, that got out of focus a bit. So we knit with the yarn from the loop. Now it gets a little bit tiny if you weren't generous, but it is still knittable. So my last stitch, I just have this little loop. Okay, and that's all I have left. Then I just have that loop. That loop is going to stay there. That edge will be a little bit messy. I slide the stitches to the needle, other end of the needle. Okay, and now I have, when I go to knit this first stitch, my working yarn is right here, ready to be worked. So we knit this first stitch. Oops, I've dropped it. Okay. Outtakes. There we go. Okay. Okay. And then we have yet another row done. So we slide the yarn back to the other end of the circular needle. And then before we start knitting, you measure out. So we take our working yarn and we measure out 3 times the length of the row. So we'll do 1, 2, 3. I tried to be generous with those. Our first stitch gets knit as normal. But then from then on, the second stitch doesn't get knit with this working yarn, it gets knit with the loop yarn. Okay. And I was a little bit more generous that time, and you can see we have quite a bigger loop. So that's fine. So that last edge stitch is quite messy, and you would not use that when you're measuring your gauge. You would only measure across these inner stitches. But what this means is we've created a swatch which is reflective of how we will knit in the round, because we have knit every single row. The problem is if you want to make a stockinette swatch flat, you would knit one row, purl one row. But if the piece that you were knitting is all in the round, then you are knitting every row, and your tension between knitting and purling probably changes. So you need to have a swatch in which you've knit every round or every row, which we've done. We've got a nice stockinette fabric to measure against. We have no floats on the back. And then if we needed to unravel this, it will all come apart in one piece. Instead of if you have the floats across the back and you've had to cut them, then that swatch is no longer usable yarn anymore. So this keeps the yarn in one continuous piece, but still gives you a nice swatch. I hope you found that helpful. Please go to jolie'skitchen.com for more tutorials. And if you've enjoyed this, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please remember to hit that like button below. Thank you very much. Bye.